the game.
Hey there, I'm Kel Siddiqui. What started as helping people with their money at my dining room table grew into a 7-figure financial coaching practice. Now I teach others how to build a thriving coaching business of their own. Whether you're just starting out or you've been coaching for years, I'm here to help you make a bigger impact while doing what you love. This is the Financial Coach Academy podcast. Let's dive in. Hey, Coach. Welcome back to the show. I have got a great episode for you today. My guest is a perfect case study in what it looks like to go from content creator to expert to coach and ultimately to business owner. But before we dive in, I want to name something that might make a few of you squirm. There are a lot of financial coaches who follow me, who listen to this podcast, who read my posts, and soak up every piece of free content I put out. And then the moment I put a price tag on something, they complain. They push back, they second guess the offer or me, and act as if it should be free just because I've shared so much other content at no cost. So here's the part that might make you squirm though. I don't consider that my issue to resolve, and neither should you, Coach. Because here's the truth. In business, your ideal client, as well as mine, is someone who is ready and willing to invest in themselves. And not just in any service, but in yours. You've heard me say it, and I will keep saying it. We are not just content creators. We are service professionals. I don't know about you, but I am not here to be an influencer. I'm here to run a business that gets people real results. One that delivers immense value, follows through on its brand promises, and pays me and my team a fair living wage for the work that we do. Yes, we create content so that people can get to know us, build trust, and feel understood. But we are not here to endlessly educate people who have no intention of taking action. As financial professionals, we are not here for the ones who think they can DIY their way out of every money problem. We're here for the ones who want a coach, who value guidance, who are ready for change. And that is exactly why I wanted to bring Walli Miller on the show. Walli is the Bronx-raised, financially fierce, first-gen millionaire behind Financially Thriving Money Coaching. She retired early, left her 9-to-5, and now helps ambitious women make work optional too. She went from public service to portfolio building and now runs a program designed to help high-achieving, latte-loving professionals stop second-guessing their money moves and start building real wealth. But before all of that, she was putting out blog posts, writing article after article, sharing helpful info, but not getting clients. She had to learn how to shift from educator to coach to business owner. She had to learn how to be seen as a coach, how to message her work, and how to sell it without cringing. And today she's going to walk us through that journey so that you can do it too. I am so excited to get into it. Welcome, Walli, to the show. I'm so excited. I want to cut right to the chase. There are a lot of coaches listening right now who are doing the work to educate people, but not necessarily seeing that effort turn into paying clients. What do you think keeps so many coaches stuck in that space?
I think it's really about, we believe that if we just teach enough, if we just share what an expert we are, that people will want to throw their money at us and pay us to help them. And I think that this was a big misconception that I had too. I said, if I just show them, if I just prove to them that I know what I'm talking about, that will be enough. And I had a lot to learn. I realized that wasn't exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah, I think the one thing I want to highlight about what you just said, because I think it's absolutely accurate though, is that it comes from a really good place, right? It really does. Like it just comes from this, I'm going to say maybe naive perspective a little bit, that it's just that simple, that if I simply educate, that they'll know what I do, who I help, how to reach out, all of those things, right? So I want to take us back now to that time when you were first just blogging, right? Putting out content, sharing really valuable resources, I'll say. So let's make sure that is known, is that these are valuable resources. What was going on in your business and in your mindset? Would you even consider it a business at the time? Was it a business as far as content creation business? And then also what was going on in your mindset?
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the big reasons is that I think we confuse educating for selling. And I'll definitely talk about what the difference is there. But initially, my journey to personal finances started with my specific journey, right? I was learning so much information. I was so upset, maybe frustrated that I didn't learn this sooner. So I went to college, I was in high school, I was several years into my career, into my profession. And when I started learning a few things about finances, I realized no one I knew was talking about this. Now, in my mind, I thought I was doing well with money because a lot of the personal finance information and sort of media heads out there were talking about stay out of debt, don't get in debt, then you'll be a great person. And so I said, okay, check. I guess I'm doing fine. And that served me well for a bit. I knew, okay, I have a job, pay your bills, stay out of debt, and you're going to be good. And so that was sort of my story. And I just kind of kept making more money, made sure that I paid my bills. And no one really told me what I should do with the money that was left over. And I know it seems, especially talking to financial coaches, it's like,
I
oh,
get
there's
it.
so many things that you could be doing. But in my mind, as someone in her 20s, just sort of learning how to navigate adulthood and how to navigate a professional career, I was like, okay, I'm paying my bills on time. I'm doing well. And as my sort of encounter to the next level, like once you know how to pay your bills and are not getting into debt, I realized that there was something that was missing. And I really encountered it through a clickbaity article. And it was like, how a couple in their 30s retired to travel the world. And that was sort of where my personal finance journey began. And I realized that there was this whole other piece that I didn't know about, which was building wealth that
Mhm.
had never really occurred to me. And so as I learned more about that, I realized that the voices that were talking, I mean, giving fantastic information, didn't quite have the same
Mhm.
perspective. I didn't have the same background. And I thought that having a more, first of all, most of them were men. And secondly, they were even less people of color talking about this. And I thought it was really important to show, okay, what happens if you are a first generation college graduate? What were some of the maybe stumbling blocks or roadblocks that are unique when you're coming from that perspective? Or if you're the eldest child coming from an immigrant family and some of those unique things that happen. And so, as I was learning on my personal finance journey, I realized that there were more voices that were needed. So, it didn't even come from a place of wanting to start a business. I was just
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
more people need to talk about this.
Yeah.
Um, and then I went to a FinCon
Mm.
as and which you are speaking at
Yeah.
this year,
Yeah.
which I'm super excited about. I went to a FinCon and I began realizing that there was a way to serve people and also to turn this into a business. And there was a little bit of a gap. I mean, not a little bit, there was a wide gap that I
Yeah.
needed to learn, but it was my introduction of, okay, how to use education to also attract money, right? To attract a business, to start a business.
Yeah. And so your first step was really about monetizing the education or the content, right? So that's what FinCon taught you first, right? Was so I'm creating this content. I'm just doing it to have the conversation and get the conversation out there and get that perspective out there. I'm not doing it as a business. Then the next step was, oh, I can actually monetize this content. There's actually a way to generate an income from what I'm already doing and enjoying doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like it was, I just wanted to get the information out there, and
Yeah.
then this little seed got planted in me. I know there's some people who've always had the entrepreneurial spirit. That was not my journey at all.
Yeah.
My journey was, I'm a 9 to 5er
Yeah.
and I'm happy being a 9 to 5er. So I just had to really explore what it even meant to make money
Yeah.
differently outside of a 9 to 5.
And then tell me about the journey from that point where I'm monetizing content, and I'm just talking about this to I want to help people, whether that is one-to-one or in a group program setting. I actually want to provide a service now, and I want to monetize that service. Tell me about that next leap.
I made so many mistakes, Kelsa. One of the things that started happening was as I was creating content, people asked me whether or not I did one on one consultation. So this was before I even knew that financial coaching was a thing. And I would just send them resources. I'm like,
Hmm.
go listen to this YouTube, watch this YouTube channel or listen to this podcast or go read this book. I have several financial
Yeah.
books behind me. And I would just want to give people the information because I still didn't quite, for me, my journey was I was a consumer of the information and I was fine with it, right? I took action. And there was a little bit of a disconnect that how you could provide people the financial literacy, but sometimes they need that additional support and guidance. And the trouble is the lack of implementation.
Hmm.
And so I made some mistakes because I think I could have started monetizing in some ways even there. But I was like, no, no, go read these books,
Yeah.
right? And it was a friend of mine who I just kept saying, oh my goodness, if you only knew what is possible out there, if you just can learn how to manage your finances and if you just did things a little bit differently. And I kept following up with her like, did you read this book? Did you watch the YouTube channel? Did you listen to the podcast? And she kept saying no. And I said, you know what? On Saturday, we're going to have a date and I'm going to help you through this. And that was, now I look back on it, but that was my introduction to coaching. And it was in that phone call with a really good friend of mine. We spent about 3 hours on the phone. And I realized the mind drama that she was having on opening her accounts, right? So it
Yeah.
wasn't following the steps. And she was a doctor. So it wasn't
Yeah.
even the math,
Totally.
right? Like she knew the math way
Yeah.
more than I did, but it was in the coaching piece. And after I had that, and again, I didn't even know that word yet,
Right.
but it was after that conversation, I said, okay, I need to figure out what these paid consultations will look like. Because I think there's people out there who need that help, right? You can provide the resources and the education, but is the fact that people need that help. And so that was when I started focusing on things that I shouldn't be focusing on, which was what should my I one of the things that I which I didn't mention, which is really important to share, is that I was providing this content anonymously. So I just had sort of an anonymous blog. And I realized that if people were going to want to work with me, I needed to put a face to what that relationship was going to look like, right? Again, my only introduction to coaching, which I didn't even know at the time, was a face-to-face, or actually it was a phone call that I had with a friend of mine, but we had been friends for decades, right?
Yeah.
So
Right.
I knew there was a level of trust there. And I said, I don't know if people are going to trust an anonymous person. And that was when I started focusing on what is going to be the name of my business, and
Mhm.
all of those things. Uh, from there, I sent a group text message to a group of friends of mine with three names of a financial coaching business. And one of my friends from another friend from that message said, when you have this open, I would like to hire you. And I was like, okay. I didn't know what to charge. I didn't know what that would look like because, again, I had not had a financial coaching session. But now I had been introduced to this term, financial coaching. And that was sort of where the business started. Again, coming from, oh, if I just provide education and blog
Mhm.
posts,
Yeah.
this is what's going to get people to work with me. So I sort of got my first paid client accidentally because this friend actually paid me. I threw a random number out there.
Yeah.
And the first thing she said was, oh, that's it. And I was
Yeah.
like, wait, this is a friend. I thought she would say, something like, girl, why am I paying you? Because this is someone who was in my wedding. We were roommates,
Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and she was like, oh, that's it. And so that was my first sort of like lesson in business,
Yeah.
which
Good.
came to like, okay, you could charge a little bit more than that. But that was sort of what happens because I think it's important to understand I came from the blogging space just wanting to provide information, but then that was my basis of building the financial coaching business, which was, okay, just do that, but put your face on it.
Yeah.
And I was missing a few steps.
So I want to try and paint this picture of you are now realizing like, okay, I want to do this. I want to have a business doing this. I actually have a client now, a friend who actually was like, oh, that's it, and wants to pay me and sees value in this. So I'm on to something, right? So you've got this vision for what you're doing. And at the same time, you're continuing what you've always done, which is writing and sharing and educating and blogging and all that kind of stuff. And that kept going for a little while. And I mean, I think it still goes, but at the time, I want you to imagine, like, when did you figure out that the way you were doing things, with the way you were writing, sort of the education structure of what you were doing, it wasn't working as far as like helping you to get clients or, helping you to necessarily have a business? When did you realize that, like, okay, something's not working?
So I got the first client, and then another week passed, and another month passed, and 3 months passed, and 4 months passed. And I was
Yeah.
still creating content, and I didn't have any other clients. And
Yeah.
so that was when I realized, like, okay, the content production isn't necessarily working here. And I will say that in addition to blog posts, I had also at a FinCon, decided to, got introduced to the worlds of Instagram and realized, okay, that could be a really great platform for me to begin using. So I started creating the quote posts and the
Yeah.
motivational, you know, uh, post that you could do on Instagram, and also including some tips, right? Your 5 tips to cut out on grocery, to reduce your costs in groceries, or 3 things you could do right now to save on your cell phone bill and plan. So to me, I was providing these amazing tips and, and
Yeah.
amazing value. But after I had that first client that came from a conversation and came from someone who I knew, and I kept putting out that content, I realized, okay, this may not be enough. And one of the things that was missing was that I was providing the value, right? I was providing the tips, but I never made an invitation for someone to hire me. I
Hmm.
didn't make an invitation for someone to come and work with me. And it took me several months of realizing that that was what was missing. So the
Yeah.
value was out there, but people didn't know what to do with the value.
Yeah. And I mean, at the time, I remember your content was so educational. I mean, I loved it as far as like, I loved the way it looked. I loved the way it sounded. You were definitely, I could tell that you were investing a lot of time, energy, and I'm going to even say intentionality and compassion to your content. Like, it was good content. So the reason I want to point that out is because I know so many coaches think that if I just throw content out on social media, that it's going to work to get me clients. Even if you have some of the best content, which I will say, Wally, you had some of the best content I've seen. It is so good. That does not necessarily mean that it's going to translate to clients, right? Like, there's things you need to do with your content in order to make that connection happen from, social media, online. I say it's the metaverse, right? The metaverse space, to a real
Yeah.
world connection of a client who wants your help and says, I want your help, and so I'm curious what helped you shift from being a content creator to fully stepping into a coach. Like, because we're sort of talking about the transition up until this point, but was there anything that sort of like really made that click? Like, when did you really turn the corner, if you will?
I think one of the things that I realized so I had been working with this one client. I ended up being, someone asked me to collaborate on an Instagram story or an Instagram live at that point. And that was where I got my second client. And now I had information from these two people and realized they were very smart people. They knew some of the basics, but what they didn't have was the belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the mistakes that people who come into this space, all we want to do is serve. All we want to do is like share what we know. And we think it's just the education, right? But remember how I mentioned one of the very first lessons that I learned, but I didn't take into my financial coaching practice, was that it wasn't a lack of information out there. And now what I was doing is just throwing more information out into the ether and not showing people what was possible. And I think that in the content, it was really important to also show, right? Because to me, the content creation meant to add more value, more tips, things like that. And what I needed to do was to help people see what was possible. And so it was a different type of content creation, but most importantly, it was just making the invitation for people to work with me, because it might seem so simple, but you adding value, whether it's on YouTube or in a podcast, on Instagram, or in blog posts, if you don't tell people what is the next step for them or what is the next step for them to work with you, you're putting too much pressure on them to go seek it out, go to your website, understand what a call does, what is going to happen on that first call, what is going to happen in coaching. And I think that that was like the different type of content that I needed to produce. So it was still creating content, but it was a little
Totally.
bit less on the know-hows, the tips and the steps, and more about helping them first believe that their finances could look differently, and also extending that invitation, making an offer, literally saying, I can help you. If you want to work with me one-on-one, here's my email, or here's the way to book a call, or whatever it is, the method that you decide to use.
Yeah, this is a perfect segue into my next question, because I know one concern you had at the time was, you didn't want to be salesy. And I'm curious what salesy meant to you at the time, and how do you define that now? Because I know some coaches would hear what you just said. You're describing it perfectly in my mind today, which is like, that's an invitation. It's just another element of education, which is, here's how we work together. Here's the next step. If you're ready, here's what we do, right? Like, it is a form of education. It's an invitation. It's not salesy, but I know some people sort of consider it salesy when they're first starting out and maybe they're a little inexperienced and that sort of thing. And I'm curious, what did salesy mean to you at the time? What does it mean now? And what would you tell a coach that maybe isn't putting out those calls to action or those invitations because of that?
Okay, so what sales meant to me at that point was that, and this was I needed to build belief in what the transformation could be for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that before I could have anybody else believe the result that they would get out of financial coaching, I needed to believe that it was possible for them, because so many times they don't believe that for themselves. So I needed to sell myself. So when we're talking about being salesy, I needed to sell myself on what was possible for them, and how I would be able to help them in their journey, right? So I needed to sell myself first. I also thought that salesy was, we all think of like that car, the
Used
used
car
car
salesman. Mm-hmm.
salesperson. Yeah, exactly. That just doesn't feel right, or being in a situation where you're pressuring someone to do something that they really don't want to do or feel regret about. And I really had to change that. When somebody reaches out, or is looking for, let's just even start with the looking for information on trying to learn how to manage their finances, or trying to find a different way of doing things because the way they're doing things just isn't working. When we are thinking about on helping them on that journey, on helping them with their finances, on being able to pay for vacations out of pocket. I also have clients where their homework assignment is to spend more money, right? Because sometimes it's not even the trouble of like saving, or getting out of debt. It's like they're hoarding money, right? They have trouble
Mm-hmm.
spending money. I think for me at the time, it felt like, why would someone pay for coaching? Again, I had this belief like all they need is the information, and I needed to believe that I could help them transform their finances faster. And so when I thought about being salesy, I sort of thought about those really uncomfortable situations of like forcing someone to part ways with their money with something that they didn't want to do. And so my belief had to come from, they are searching for this because they want change, and you have to show them that change is possible. That's what the sales process is, right? The sales process is helping someone make a down payment, right? And it is a payment, make a down payment on their breakthrough, on their financial breakthrough. And I know it sounds so basic, But really, that's what it was for me.
It's
It
so
was,
true.
I needed to believe that that they were wanting to have that breakthrough, and they were wanting to invest that money in order to have that breakthrough. So I needed to sell myself first, that selling was service. And so when you ask now, like, what is sale being salesy to you, or what does sales mean to you? I'm like, I love sales.
Yeah.
Sales to me is being able to paint the picture of what is possible. It's me providing a service before they pay me a dime, of building that belief that their finances could look different, that they can be debt free, that they can have a savings fund fully funded, that they can be work optional, that they can build wealth over time. I'm like, I love sales.
Yeah.
I love sales because sales is just providing that service.
This is such a shift, Wally, and I just love it so much because it makes me, I'm just sitting here thinking back to when we first met and you came into our elite program. And do you remember, I feel like at the time you were, I'm going to say, a little consumed with the idea that there was like some perfect Instagram structure or strategy or some method that was like going to be the thing that worked for you, that was going to like crack the code, right? That there was like some way that if you could just figure that out, then everything else, when really so much of it really comes down to belief. And I'm curious, how did that shift for you? Because it doesn't sound like now that you're even concerned with that at all. Like you've just completely, you know, you sort of trust that, like, I'm going to put this message out there that people can resonate with. And that's the code. The code is being authentic, being of service, telling people honestly and truly how I can help them and showing them the path forward. And I'm curious what created that shift from one to the other since you were in the elite program.
Yeah, so I worked with Jill one on one, which was fantastic. And I will say that I still have to remind myself. I have post-its right
Oh,
above
good.
this monitor,
Yeah.
right before I get on a sales call, right before I have that conversation, right? I literally have, your clients are waiting to pay for their, are
I
willing to
love
make their
it.
down payment on the breakthrough, right? Profit is the applause of service, right? So
Oh,
I
I love
have
that.
all of these things. So it's important to know that it's not like a one and done, right? Even when
Yeah.
you talked about the perfectionism, I'm like, yeah, I do believe that that selling someone into the journey of financial coaching is that transformation that they want, that they so desire. I still, right? And maybe there will be one day that I'm like, never have to sort of coach myself before. But I just have a different sort of perspective now, that it doesn't require as much, because I just remind myself of that profit is the applause of service. And as long as I am providing a service, as long as I'm willing to serve, that's really the word, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I'm willing to serve my clients well, that they will get the transformation that they want. When I worked with Jill, there were a couple of things going on. I was needing to shift the idea from being a content creator and also a coach. I had a high belief in my coaching abilities, but I didn't have a full belief in my business
Mm-hmm.
skills or in my entrepreneurship. And I needed to shift that identity. I needed to build that identity. And that was something that Jill really helped me with, because I actually left my 9 to 5 while I was working with her. And one of the shifts that I had was, I went from, I think, while working with Jill in the elite program, one of the things that happened, I had my most profitable month ever for the time. And I think within 2 months, I decided that I was going to go all in on financial coaching. And also, a little part of my backstory is I'm also part of what some people might know of the early retirement fire
Mm-hmm.
movement.
Sure.
So I was financially capable of being able to do that. And one of the very first things that happened in that month that I left was that I stopped marketing and selling as much, because I had this goal for what I wanted my financial coaching practice to look like. And one of the most beautiful things that Jill shared with me was, now that I'm willing to shift my perspective, right, into being an entrepreneur and coach, one of the things that happens is like that self sabotage, right? I had this idea of like, well, I don't really need to do this. But what I was really fearing was that if I went all in on my business and then it didn't work out, then I was going to feel that
Mm-hmm.
sense of failure. So in some ways, I started to self sabotage of like not marketing as much, not showing up, because really what would happen is that at the end of the year, if I didn't reach my goal, I would have the reasons why that didn't happen. Right. I would say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, well, I know why it didn't happen. I put my, I took my foot off the brake in talking to people, in making offers and creating, value for the people that I wanted to serve. Oh, that's why I didn't reach my goal. But uh, like when she pointed that out to me, I was just like, oh my God, that makes so much sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was like that fear of failure, which some of our clients have, right? It's the belief
Absolutely.
like, it's so scary that if they invest in financial coaching
Yeah.
or if they start this path, what about if it doesn't work out for them? And
Absolutely.
they fear that more than
Yeah.
just what's possible.
100% accurate. God, there's so many gems, and I hope everybody is listening to this and taking notes and listening to it over and over and over again. So I'm curious, what would you say to the coach who's putting out free content but struggling to say, hey, I can help you with this, and here's how you work with me? So taking that step, adding that wording to their messaging and in their content right now, what helped you to feel more confident taking that step, and what kind of advice do you have for other coaches?
Okay, so I remember thinking people were saying in my content, "Oh, that's so good." Or one of the things that I felt comfortable with was sharing my financial journey and sharing my story. So people were saying things like, "I'm inspiring," right? They're even sharing my post, but no one was booking a call with me. And so it was like, what am I missing? And it hit me. I wasn't making it easy for people to take the next step.
Yeah.
And so, really showing people what that next step is, right? So, here's some tips that I shared with you. Okay, awesome. But if you want to take this to the next level, book that call with me. What did it mean to book a call? So, and then in the next post, in our call, this is what's going to happen. And I would
Yeah.
just take people on a journey and I would rinse and repeat it, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes we think, especially if you're on, emailing or using social media, that our clients, that our audience is online as much as we are, and they're
Hmm.
not. They're
No.
living their lives, they're raising their families, they're working. So I think it's really about how can I make it easy for someone to take that next step? And that
I
next
love that.
step could be, yes, it could be a simple financial tip, but that next step might also be to work with me one on one. And how can I make it really easy, make it a no brainer, make it not scary, and really educating in a different way, right? Instead of
Yeah.
sharing the tips, it's educating on what's the next way to work with me.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons people find your content inspiring is because they can visualize themselves following that same path or having a similar outcome or experiencing financial wins, or you give them that vision, right? They can visualize it. And then we completely drop the ball when we don't help them visualize how to work with us or what it's like to work with us or what the next step is, and we just
Mm-hmm.
assume they know that part. We don't assume they know what it's like to have a vision for their future financially. We know that we need to help them with that, but then we sort of forget that we also need to help them see and visualize what comes next and how to get that help, like sort of what the first step is. You know what I mean? So I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you sort of
The
bridged
coach
that gap.
Yeah, I was going to say the coaching starts almost like before the coaching relationship begins, right? So
Absolutely.
if you are
Yeah.
if you are thinking about, okay, how can I help someone believe that this journey, that this financial journey is going to be worth it? It starts right there before you ever have a one-on-one conversation with them. It starts with helping them believe that they can make that first step, that they can take that next step. And then again, making it super simple. It feels obvious, but it isn't obvious. Like, if you are creating content, like if you want people to share the content, you have to tell people to share the content. If you want someone to book that call with you, you have to invite people to book that call with you.
Yeah, absolutely. In the Financial Coach Academy, when we tell people, like, here's the first step, right? So whether it's a consult or a discovery session, whatever a person's business model ends up being, here's the first step. Now we want you to ask yourself, before that first step, what is that person thinking? What are they feeling? What are they doing with their money? What are they not doing with their money? What are they experiencing? What's their belief system like? Like, really try to understand that person, because that's your marketing. That's who you're marketing to, is that person before the first step, just like you were alluding to. So I love that you said that, because it's simple, but it's not obvious. I feel like, right? Like, as soon as you say it, it feels so simple, but it's not that obvious. So I'm so glad that you said that. I'm curious. Let's see. As a woman of color and a first-gen millionaire, how has your identity shaped the way you approach coaching, visibility, and even pricing your services?
This is such a good question. I think one of the reasons why, again, when I go back to why I started writing those blog posts, I think particularly for people of color, women of color, women who are breadwinners, right? There, we are already a smaller community, and so we want to see that other people who look like us, who have similar backgrounds, have achieved the thing that we want to achieve. It just makes it a little bit more believable,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you see someone who is talking about being a first generation college graduate and being a daughter of an immigrant and, being a first gen millionaire, it just feels a little bit more possible when you see someone who has a similar background to you. And I think that this is why I don't think it's necessary to always share your story, but it's so powerful when you do, because there are
Mm-hmm.
going to be some people who are not going to be able to relate to it. Then there's going to be some people who are going to see themselves in what you've overcome and what you've accomplished, and being able to showcase that is really important. So, you know, even though I talk about being a first gen millionaire in my content, even when you said it, it like it doesn't always feel like the most
Yeah.
comfortable. And that's okay. Like
Yeah.
that's okay. And it's okay. Not, you don't have to share all the nitty gritty details. But I think even that discomfort, someone said to me, what is the price that you are willing to pay in order to have someone else succeed? What is the price that you are willing to pay in order for someone else to have financial independence and build wealth? And I said, well, when I'm thinking about, selling, or when I'm thinking about creating content or being visible, it's very
Vulnerable.
uncomfortable, right? And I'm like, are you willing, Wally? Are you willing to pay the price of sitting in discomfort? Is that the price you're willing to pay for someone else's breakthrough? And when I think about that, when I think about, okay, I don't feel like posting on Instagram, or I don't want to write this email, or I don't want to make an invitation, I don't want to serve in this way, in this capacity. I just want to serve my clients. I just go back to that, asking myself that question of, right now, the price that I have to pay is being uncomfortable. The price that I have to pay is is sitting in discomfort. Am I willing to pay that price in order for someone else to have their breakthrough? And when I go back to that, I'm like, yeah, it's worth it.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for making that decision. I really appreciate knowing that you are out there helping people and making that sacrifice. I really appreciate it. What do you love most about being a coach now compared to that early version of yourself who was writing all of those blog posts? And I know you still write. I don't want anyone to think that like you're not out there creating content, because of course you are. It's just an avenue of your business now where it wasn't before. So I'm curious sort of what you love most about being a coach now.
My when I first started as a financial coach, or even when I started on writing the blog posts, I love the math. I love the spreadsheets, and I love the tactical strategies. Now, I will say I still love that for sure.
I do
But what
too.
I love most is the aha moments that my clients have when they realize what's possible for them, When
Yeah.
they realize they can go on vacation and not have to fear what that credit card bill is going to look like when they come back from the vacation, when they realize that they finally have enough for the down payment on their home, when they realize they have enough for their family planning fund and have enough to secure, IVF treatment or adoption fees, right? When they realize that they don't have to work until they're 65 if they don't want to, that there's a plat that they could create. So I think for me, what coaching is helping people believe that it's possible. And that is my favorite part of the work, is showing people what's possible
Yeah. When they see it, it's so beautiful because we
when
see it
they see it.
oftentimes, right? But when they see it, yes. Oh, I love that. I think this was probably one of our most powerful episodes, Wally. Thank you so much for sharing as much as you did. I'm curious how people can find you if they want to check you out and check out some of your awesome content.
Okay, well, I don't write blog posts as much anymore, but I definitely create a lot of content on Instagram. So you can check me out on Instagram, which is financially_thriving. And I have a pretty snazzy email list, which is or email. That I send out. And that's also been really interesting because even though I was blogging, it took me years to translate my content into writing consistent emails. And I really resisted it for such a long time. And now I love writing emails because I'm just thinking of the clients that I'm currently
Yes.
working with. And I'm thinking of the people on my list. Again, how can I serve them? What are the questions that they have? Why haven't they booked a call with me yet? What don't they believe is possible for them? How can I help them
Yeah.
believe that something different could be possible? So I love that's one of the other ways that I'm now creating content that just feels so easy, so much easier now.
Yeah. I think that's one thing that I just want to touch on really quickly. In this episode is our clients then begin to inspire our content, right? Where before you were a content
Yes.
creator and so much of it was your story, your journey, all of that. And the shift that sort of has to happen is where you're now writing content, creating content that is actually being inspired by the conversations you're having with real people, with clients and that sort of thing, and using them as your inspiration. But that takes time for that inspiration. And I will say that creative spark to sort of lean into it a little bit. It takes a little bit of practice. It's like a new skill set a little bit. Not an entirely new skill set, but it does take a little bit of like finding your groove a little bit, I will say.
Yeah.
So
And I will say one of the things that did happen was that when I started posting, most of my clients in the beginning of my business came from Instagram. When I first started posting on Instagram, it was fun. I didn't know what I
yeah,
was doing.
yeah,
So I was just posting things. It was so much fun. And I will say one of the things that happened was then I started listening to, oh, this is what a good hook looks like, or
hmm,
this is what a good caption looks like. And then the self critical questioning, perfectionism in creating the content really became a stumbling block for me. So then the content that was just so free flowing, that I was just kind of getting curious and I was just posting things to help people with, became sort of like a chore because there was
yeah,
like a checklist of things to do, and it stopped being fun. And I had to take a step back from Instagram because some people will never be on Instagram. They don't like it, or whatever social media platform, right? Some
sure,
people just, and I don't think that social media is a place where you need to be.
yeah,
But if you want to be there, find the fun in it. And
yeah,
something that you just said was, when I share my client stories, that is fun to me. When I share the and when I talk about sharing their stories, basically it's the questions that come up in our conversations. I'm like, oh, there's other people who have this same type of question. When I share, and something that I need to do better at is actually sharing their actual stories, because I did this with one client. I asked permission, of course, anonymized it, right? No detailed information about what they had done. But it was such their story was they had this dream car they wanted to buy. And we had been working together for about a year. So
What was the dream car?
they had done a lot of work. It's a Corvette. Oh, I'm not
okay.
a Corvette. It's a Corvette. It's a Corvette
Okay.
that they wanted
Just
to
curious.
purchase. And so they wanted to purchase this Corvette. And so they came to one of our sessions and they were like, oh, we haven't told you this, but we want to buy this thing and we kind of want your blessing. And, I kind of like laughed inside because I'm
Yeah.
like, you don't need my blessing to do
Yeah.
this, right? But then we talked about that, right? Like even that, the fact that they thought they needed someone's stamp of approval was a place that I wanted to coach on. But then we did work on the numbers. And when they saw what the numbers look like, that they could actually purchase the Corvette in, I think, 6 months. Yeah. So we had this conversation at the beginning of the year. And so they're on their way to buying this car in the summer. So I'm super excited for them. I left the call and I told my husband and I said, I am helping my clients buy their dream car. They're debt free. They have all of these things in place. And now they get to have so much fun with their money. And I felt like sharing that story. And I asked if I could share that story. And they said, sure. And I changed the type of car, I think, or maybe I wasn't specific. I just said dream car in my content. And she thanked me. She was like, thank you so much for celebrating us, because sometimes you forget, right? They forget like where they had come. And so even that was like, wow, I need to do more of that, right? I need to make sure that my clients also feel celebrated, because then everybody was like, wow, this is amazing. And they got to see the messages that were on that post. And so when we're working with our clients are the best way to get content, right? Because the questions that come up, the stumbling blocks that they have along the way, the successes, all of those things that happen it's just such organic material that comes from, instead of, trying to write, 5 tips for grocery, reducing groceries.
Right.
Where it's like, oh, actually, and those are helpful for sure, but like there's nothing like having these true stories to pull from.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems I have now is because I'll usually stack my client sessions. So I usually like sort of go back to back, and I get to the end of the day and I'm like, oh, I don't remember. What was it that I know I had an idea earlier of something that would make great content, and now I forgot what it is. I always believe it'll come back to me at some point. I'll remember what it was, and that's fine. But it's like I don't always have time to like write a note to myself sort of thing about like, what was that idea again? Because really some of the sessions is just one idea or one conversation starter after another that would work so beautifully for content. So I love this episode. Thank you so much for being with me today. And I just love how your story is just so real. And I really appreciate that. You didn't start with it all figured out. You're very honest about that. You started by trying to help people, just like so many of us do. But the moment Walli gave herself permission to own her coaching as a business, to be clear, direct, and visible about how she helps, so much changed. So if you're still in content creator mode, consider this your gentle nudge or maybe a kick in the pants. Let people know what you do, tell them how they can work with you, and don't hide behind helpfulness and education. Walli, thank you so much for your honesty and insight today. It was so powerful, and it was such a joy having you. In our next episode, we're going to be talking about, will AI replace the need for financial coaches, and what role can AI play in your business? I'll see you next week, Coach. That's all for today. If you're ready to grow your own financial coaching business, head over to financialcoachacademy.com for helpful resources and tools. If this episode helped you, hit subscribe and leave us a review. I'll see you next week.